Ever play a game so real you forget it's, like, all code underneath?
Totally. Games that just pull you in.
Exactly. Like Subnautica, ever get lost in those ocean depths?
Yeah, oh yeah. Or Firewatch, the atmosphere in that game.
See, both Unity games. And guess what?
Yeah.
We're about to dive into the code that makes that kind of stuff possible
But this book right here, Mastering Unity Scripting.
by Alan Thorne. But full disclosure,
It's a bit of a beast.
kinda. So we're pulling out the most useful C# tips, the stuff that'll actually level up your game dev.
And trust me, even if you've been using Unity for a while, there are some real aha moments in here.
Because we're talking about Alan Thorne.
Hmm?
This guy's been in the game dev trenches for, like, over a decade.
Yeah. Founded his own studio, even created an award-winning game called, hold on, I wrote it down, Baron Wittard, Nemesis of Ragnarok.
Seriously impressive. And he teamed up with Alessandro Mochi for this book. Another game dev veteran, by the way.
Yeah, huge gamer, that one. From the classics all the way to the latest indie stuff. Knows his stuff.
So you're in good hands with this deep dive. Now, I'm guessing you've at least skimmed through that C# refresher in Chapter 1. Even if you're a coding pro, there are some sneaky good tips in there.
Right, like in Chapter 3 where he talks about optimizing game objects, getting that code to run smooth, especially if you're aiming for that sweet 60 frames per second.
Because nobody wants a slideshow instead of a game.
Exactly.
Right.
So Thorne has this great tip about using get component to grab those components you're always using, but, and this is key, do it in the start or awake functions. You're hitting your game's performance every single frame. Imagine running a marathon while carrying, like, a backpack full of rocks.
Ouch. Yeah, not ideal.
Right. And then there's enums. Now, I used to think these were just, I don't know, fancy variables, but the example in the book, the enemy state one, total game changer.
Okay, break that down for me.
So say you've got an enemy, right? And they can be patrolling, attacking, or searching. Enums let you define those states clearly in your code.
Ah, so instead of just using, like, random numbers or something.
Right. So your code's cleaner, less chance of errors, and way easier for others to understand.
Which is huge if you're ever collaborating on a project.
Yeah.
Or even just, like, looking back at your own code later.
Totally. And speaking of making your life easier, Chapter 4 gets into delegates and interfaces.
Oh, yeah, these could be tricky.
They're like choosing the right tool for the job. But in Unity's event-driven world, picking the wrong one, let's just say, can really slow you down.
So help me choose. Give me a scenario.
Okay, imagine your character's health drops below 0. Game over, right? Do you use a delegate? An interface? The book actually helps you decide strategically.
Which can make all the difference when you're trying to optimize performance.
Exactly. It's all about working smarter, not harder. Now let's talk singletons. They might sound kind of mysterious.
A little bit, yeah.
But super useful. Think of it like the one ring in, what's that book?
Lord of the Rings.
That's the one. You only need one to rule them all. Same with singletons. You only want one instance of that object active.
Okay, so give me a practical example of why I'd want that.
So picture this. You've got a game manager object. It keeps track of the score, player progress, all those game essentials. You don't want multiple versions of that running around causing havoc, right?
No, that sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
Exactly. Thorne uses that exact example in the book. A singleton game manager keeps everything tidy and working as it should.
Okay, I'm starting to see the power of this singleton thing. It's like the conductor of your game's orchestra.
Perfect analogy. Now, remember how we talked about find objects off type earlier?
Yeah, that handy way to find stuff in your scene.
Well, turns out it's not so handy in the update function. Thorne actually advises against using it there.
Wait, really? Why is that?
It can be a real resource hog. Think of it like searching your entire house for your keys every single second.
Okay, yeah, that'd get old fast. And your house would be a mess.
Exactly. The book does offer some great alternatives in Chapter 3, though. Ways to find what you need without killing your game's performance.
See, this is why I love deep dives. Already finding ways to optimize my code just from our conversation.
We're just getting started.
Okay, let's break down this whole event-driven programming thing in Unity. Sounds kind of technical, but Thorne dedicates a whole chapter to it, so it's got to be important, right?
It's huge. Think of it this way. Every frame in your game is precious. It's like a tiny slice of time where your game can either shine or, completely fall apart.
Right, like those moments in a game where everything just slows down and you're like, come on, get a move on.
Exactly. Event-driven programming is all about making the most of those tiny slices of time, instead of constantly checking for everything under the sun every single frame.
Which sounds kind of exhausting when you put it that way.
It is. So instead of that, you focus on responding to specific events when they happen. Makes your game run way smoother.
Okay, so paint me a picture. How would this work in, say, a platformer?
Okay, your character's running along, jumps, and bam, lands right on a spike trap. Game over, right?
Yeah, not good.
So with event-driven programming, instead of checking every frame if the character is touching a spike,
You just wait for that fatal moment.
exactly. You set up an event that only triggers when that collision happens, saves you a ton of processing power.
So the game's not wasting precious frames on something that might not even happen. Smart.
Right. And Thorn really drives home this point. Overloading your update function is a recipe for disaster. It's like trying to juggle a dozen chainsaws while riding a unicycle.
Yeah, that's not going to end well for anyone. Okay, so what's the solution? Didn't he mention something called an event manager?
Oh, yeah, that's the ticket. It's like having a dedicated messaging system for your entire game.
Instead of everything just shouting at each other all the time.
Exactly. With an event manager, you've got one central hub. Different parts of your game can be like, hey, this just happened. And only the parts that need to know will react.
Ah, so it's like a really organized party. Everyone's got an invitation, but they only show up if it's relevant to them.
Perfect analogy. And Thorn actually gives you two ways to build this event manager, one using interfaces and one using delegates.
Oh, right. Those things we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's like choosing your preferred method of communication.
Exactly. So by using an event manager, you're freeing up those precious frames for the good stuff. Awesome graphics, immersive sound effects.
You know, all the things that make a game truly great.
Absolutely. Speaking of making your life easier, Thorn slips in this little gem in the front matter of the book. It's a subscription service called Packlib. It's for tech books. And knowing how much you love a good deep dive.
Oh, I'm all ears. It's like finding a secret level in a game.
Yeah.
But while we're on the topic of useful tools, let's not forget about source control.
Oh, absolutely crucial, especially for bigger projects or if you're working with a team.
Right. And Chapter 10 actually has a whole section on Git, which is what, like a time machine for your code?
Basically, it tracks every little change you make, so you can experiment freely, and if you ever mess things up...
Which we all do from time to time.
Exactly. You can just rewind back to a previous version. No harm, no foul.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
But I thought Git was mainly for teams. Is it really that useful for solo devs too?
100%. Even if you're working alone, Git helps you stay organized. You can track your progress, experiment without that fear of breaking everything.
Because we've all been there, right? That moment of, oh no, what have I done?
Right. And if you ever do want to collaborate with someone down the line, you're already set up. Easy peasy.
Okay, so Git, it's like a superpower for game devs of all levels.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, we wanted to leave you with a thought-provoking idea, something to ponder.
Oh, I love these aha moments. Lay it on me.
Remember how we talked about efficient C# scripting
Right.
and how every frame counts? Well, Chapter 7 touches on artificial intelligence in games.
Right, making those non-player characters come to life. But isn't that a whole other beast?
It is. And Thorn makes a really interesting point. Creating believable AI isn't about perfectly mimicking human thought. It's about creating the illusion of intelligence.
So it's like a magic trick.
Exactly. It's not real magic, but it creates a sense of wonder and amazement.
So we're talking about the appearance of intelligent behavior, even if the code underneath isn't, actually sentient.
You got it. And here's where it gets really cool. By mastering Unity scripting, by making your code as efficient as possible.
Wait, I think I see where you're going with this. You're saying that even if our code isn't truly intelligent, we can still make those characters act in ways that feel real.
Exactly. It's all about that smooth, optimized code running behind the scenes.
Wow, mind blown. Okay, I am so ready to dive into the next part of this book. What other surprises does Alan Thorne have in store for us? Okay, I'm starting to think Alan Thorne has a time turner hidden away somewhere. Seriously, how else could he fit so much into one book?
Right, it's packed with info.
It's not just about the code itself either. It's like he's teaching you how to think like a game dev,
Totally. He's showing you the tricks of the trade. Like, remember we talked about those visibility checks for optimizing performance?
Yeah, those were cool. Making sure you're not wasting resources on stuff the player can't even see.
Exactly. Well, Chapter 5 dives deep into that whole world of cameras, rendering, scenes. He even gets into ray casting. It's like giving your game X-ray vision.
Okay, now that sounds impressive. Tell me more about this raycasting thing.
So imagine shining a flashlight into your game world. Raycasting basically lets you do that with code. You can see exactly what the player's view is hitting, even if there's stuff in the way.
Ah, So you could optimize even further by, like, ignoring objects that are completely blocked from view.
You got it.
Yeah.
He really covers all the bases in this chapter. He even walks you through setting up different types of cameras. Like, remember those old school RPGs? The ones with that kind of top-down miniature worldview?
Oh, yeah. Those were classic.
Those use something called orthographic cameras. And Thorne actually shows you how to set those up yourself.
It's amazing how those little details, those camera angles, can really change the whole feel of a game.
Totally. And it doesn't stop there. He even gets into post-processing effects for your cameras, like fades, color adjustments.
Ooh, yeah, those subtle touches can make a big difference.
Exactly. It's all about creating that immersive cinematic feel. But, sometimes C# alone can't do it all.
Right, like what if you need to do something super specific?
Exactly. That's where the Mono framework comes in.
Now, remind me again, what's the Mono framework?
So Unity's actually built on top of Mono, which is this huge library of pre-built code. Think of it like a giant toolbox.
Okay, I like that analogy.
So instead of having to code every single little thing from scratch,
You could just pull out a pre-made tool from the Mono framework.
Exactly. And Chapter 6 is like your guide to this amazing toolbox, lists, dictionaries, even those regular expressions things.
Those still sound a bit like magic to me, to be honest.
They kind of are. They're basically super-powered search and replace tools, but for text. It's advanced stuff, but super useful once you get the hang of it.
Man, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. I feel like I need to go back and reread the entire book now.
You and me both. And even then, I bet we discover even more useful stuff. That's the thing about this book, is like a gold mine of information.
It really is.
Yeah.
So, for our listener out there, the one who's ready to take their Unity skills to the next level, what's the one thing you want them to take away from this deep dive?
Honestly, if you're serious about game development, get your hands on mastering Unity scripting. It's not just for beginners, it's for anyone who wants to write cleaner code, make smarter design decisions.
And ultimately create games that are both impressive and fun to play, which is the whole point,
I
right?
couldn't have said it better myself.
So, to our listener out there, go forth and create something amazing. And if you ever hit a roadblock, you know where to find us. Happy scripting.